Good morning, church. It's my privilege today to visit with you about Psalm 77 on this year of the Psalms. And this is a great one. It's really a real-life psalm, I would call it. The writer of the psalm is just speaking to real life. And he starts out with the psalm by saying, "I cry out to God, oh, that God would listen to me." And he begins to talk about how he's in deep trouble and his life is really pretty bad. He's in anguish and he's in a bad place in verses 1 through 3. And he's really kind of asking, why doesn't God respond? Does God not hear me? I'm in such a bad place that I am overwhelmed, it says in verse 3. And then he takes a pause. The word Selah says, I've got to take a breath. And then beginning in verse 4, he talks about, I can't sleep. I'm so distressed I can't even pray. I can't even speak to God. He's in a very bad place. In verse 5, he says, I think of the good old days. And he's reminiscing to when things evidently were good in his life. But he gets in such a bad place that he says he can't sleep. I search my soul and I cannot get any sort of peace. And he says in verse 7, has the Lord rejected me forever? He's in a pretty bad place when he considers that the Lord has totally forgotten him. Now we know that doesn't happen, and on this side of it, we know that never happens. But in the midst of a trial, I think sometimes we can get there. We can say, gosh, has the Lord forgotten about little old me? Has He rejected me? Is He punishing me? And so in this passage, all the way down through verse 10, he's really in a bad place. In fact, in verse 10, he almost says that God is against him. He says, the Most High has turned His hand against me. Like he's gotten to such a negative place that he even considers that God is against him. Now, recently I had the privilege to share Psalm 40 on a Sunday morning with our congregation, and it kind of had a similar feel. David had found himself in a pit. And again, he found himself in a really bad place. Things were going terrible in his life. And he was full of complaints. And he asked the same question, why doesn't God respond? Let me just remind you that sometimes it's really good that God doesn't answer all our prayers. I look back over my life, and there are times that I really prayed for something fervently. But on this side of it, I'm glad that God said no. On this side of it, I'm glad that God said wait. And on this side of it, I'm glad He provided a different answer than I requested at times. You know, if God had answered all my prayers the way I wanted them answered, I might not be in the place I am today. And then in verse 11, he changes his tone. Thank the good Lord, he changes his tone. In verse 11, he says, but then. What a great turn right there. He says, but then, but God, but then I recall all you have done, O Lord. I remember your wonderful deeds of long ago. And then he begins to recount all the great things that God had done in his life. That's a great place to turn to. If you're in a place of despair and hopelessness today, just remember the past. Look back to all the great things God has done, the way He has sustained you and blessed you and been faithful in your life. And he begins to do this process by saying, God, you are still my God. Your ways are holy. Your ways are great. And by your strong arm, you are still my God. And then actually in verse 16, he begins to seemingly have these visions of the past. And he remembers the Red Sea when God parted the waters and the children of Israel were able to cross the Red Sea on dry ground. And he begins to get his perspective in the right place. And he says, God, you are our God. You are my God. Verse 13, to back up a little bit, he says, there is no one like our God. Oh God, your ways are holy. Is there any God as mighty as you? And we know that there isn't. We know there is no one like our God. He rules the nations and He rules our hearts. And we are so glad that He's our God. And so this morning, as you hear this, I want to just challenge you. If you're in a pit, or if you're in a horrible place, or you've even got to the place, like we all have at times, to saying, does God even hear me? Does He even really care anymore? I want to challenge you to say, yes, He does. And I want to challenge you to look back to the past and see the ways that He has been there for you exactly when you needed Him. His timing may not be our timing, but He's always right on time. And I want to close this morning with a lyric to an old hymn entitled, Count Your Blessings. And the first verse says this, when upon life's billows you are tempest tossed, when you are discouraged thinking all is lost, Count your many blessings, name them one by one, and it will surprise you what the Lord has done. And then the chorus says, count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your blessings, see what God has done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your many blessings, see what God has done. Let me encourage you, God still loves you. He has a plan for your life. He has not forgotten you. And I want to encourage you to count your blessings. God bless you. Have a great day.